Welcome to Speak and Heal. My name is Father Danny. Today we look at a short discussion about pardon and forgiveness. That there is a difference between pardon and forgiveness, or forgiveness and pardon. They are not one and the same. Forgiveness is an internal process, a process that takes place in the heart, a process that allows you to let go anger and resentment. Anger and resentment. Whenever one has been offended, one gets annoyed and one develops some sort of resentment towards that person. But when the process of forgiveness has taken place, the offended encounters the offender not as the offender but as a human person. Encounters the person who offended you, or you encounter the person who offended you as a human person, not as the offender. When the process of forgiveness is complete, whenever you meet the person who offended you, you do not meet a person and immediately what comes to mind is, this is the person who abused me. This is the person who insulted me. This is the person who told lies about me. This is the person who damaged my public image. This is the person who spoiled my career. This is a person who accused me falsely. That means the process, the internal process of forgiveness has not been complete. It's not complete yet. Because you still have that resentment and anger towards that person. So forgiveness is complete when you meet the person who offended you without anger or resentment or thoughts that come to mind of seeing that person as the offender. This is a criminal. You don't see a criminal in that person, but you encounter a human person. You encounter an individual with human weaknesses, an individual who is frail in human sense. That you do not equate the person with the offense. Of course, I understand in law, many persons who have been convicted, they are labeled, called this a felon, this a criminal, this is whoever, ex-convict, and those names, they follow people who have been convicted. But when it comes to forgiveness, such does not happen in the heart, because you no longer have anger, you no longer have resentment, and whenever you meet the person, you meet an individual, a human person. You don't meet a crime, you don't meet a criminal, you don't meet a felon, you meet a human person. You don't meet a drunkard, you meet a human person. You don't meet an adulterer, you meet a human person. You do not meet an abuser, you meet a human person, because you have forgiven and you are not equating the offender with the offense. You have to differentiate between the offense and the offender. That process takes place in the heart, which frees an individual from captivity of anger and resentment to the person who may have offended you. For Christians, we are called to forgive. And that process can be painful, since true forgiveness is painful. It can be a struggle. It can take time. So we are not in a hurry to conclude, oh, I have forgiven you. It is not a matter of saying I've forgiven you. It's a process of healing to free yourself from anger and resentment. For it is not an external process, it's an internal process. Telling somebody I've forgiven you is not the same as freeing yourself from anger and resentment towards that person. You may tell the person, I've forgiven you, but you still have resentment and anger towards that person for the offense that person committed against you. You have not forgiven. You are still healing. You are still in the process of healing, of freeing yourself from resentment and anger against that person who offended you. You have not fully forgiven the person. You are in the process of forgiving. It takes time. It can be painful. You may have told the person, I've forgiven you, but whenever you meet the person, you meet the person as the person who did this to me, the person who committed this against me, the person who did A, B, C, D against me. You are still in the process of healing. Though you have confessed that you are forgiven, but you are in the process of healing, and true, perfect forgiveness has not been achieved yet. You are still in the process of forgiving, though you have said it. But the moment you meet the person and you feel some sort of anger and resentment, you have not forgiven fully. You are in the process, because forgiveness is an internal process. When it is complete, when you meet the person, you don't meet an offender, you meet a human person. While pardon, on the other hand, is not forgiveness. You can pardon somebody without forgiving. Pardon is an external act, external process, not an internal process. You can pardon but still retain anger and resentment. This is a person who abused me. This is a person who insulted me, but I'm not going to hold it against you. I'm not going to hold you accountable. But I still retain resentment and anger against you. I have not forgiven you. I've only ignored, denied the facts. I've only let you go without holding you accountable to what you did. But forgiveness, I can hold you accountable to what you did, but still forgive you. Or I may choose not to hold you accountable to what you did to me and still forgive you. Forgiveness can take both. I will hold you accountable and still forgive you. I will pardon you without holding you accountable to what you did, but still forgive you. What is pardon sometimes? For those who are in married relationship, pardon can lead a person to becoming even more irresponsible in a relationship. For example, in marriage, many couples have pardoned their spouses of many things. Some have ignored facts and the realities of their marriages. That's a form of pardoning, not holding the person accountable to what they did or what they are doing in a marriage relationship. For example, spouses have ignored and pardoned their spouses on things to do with adultery. My wife was messing with my neighbor, or my husband was found with some student. I pardon that person, I pardon my wife and say, okay, I'm not holding you accountable to what you did. But still, internally, I am annoyed with you. I hold some resentment against you for what you did, but I'm not holding you accountable. But I still hold resentment and anger within me. Spouses have pardoned and ignored addictions in their marriages, some weird addictions in the marriage relationship. They have ignored and pardoned indifference in the marriage relationship. And some many things that people have done in a marriage relationship which have led, after time, led to divorce in many marriages. Why? Because there was a lot of pardon, no forgiveness. They pardoned each other, but never forgave each other. But in a good marriage relationship, there should be pardon and forgiveness. And these two must go hand in hand if the person commits to change. For example, if I were married and I cheat on my wife. I tell my wife the truth. My wife struggles to forgive me. My wife says, you have to make a commitment. From now on, assure me you are not going to cheat on me again. Tell me the whole truth. I tell my wife the whole truth. And my wife says, okay, I pardon you and forgive you. She has given me two things. She has pardoned me from my mistake, and she forgives me from the heart. And she takes long a time or a process to forgive, so that whenever we meet in the house at the dinner, she does not meet an adulterer at the table. She meets a husband. She does not meet a liar at dinner table. She meets a husband. Why? Because she forgave me from her heart, and she does not see me as a cheater, as a liar, as an adulterer. She sees me as me, husband, a man in the house. But she can choose to do the other way, to pardon me, not to hold me accountable to my cheating. Just let it slide, ignore it, but still hold in her heart resentment and anger towards me. So whenever we meet at table, she sees a liar, she sees a cheater, she sees an adulterer. She has not forgiven me, though she pardoned me. And if she pardons me without holding me accountable, she contributes to making me even more irresponsible. Because if she were to pardon me, she was to ask, okay, I will pardon you, but I would like to hold you accountable to what you did. Tell me the whole truth. What is happening? What's wrong with you? Then I have to explain and talk about everything in the open, holding me accountable. And now from there, this is how we are going to go about it. Holding me accountable and at the same time forgiving me. So there is a difference between forgiving and pardoning. An internal process that frees the offended from anger and resentment, while pardon is to letting it go without holding the person accountable to whatever the person did, even without forgiveness. But one can pardon and forgive at the same time. But pardon itself does not necessarily ask for forgiveness. So, my brothers and sisters, as Christians, we are called to forgive. We are called to forgive. Unless we forgive, we may not be forgiven. But in order to live in a good world, a good society, our forgiveness also should include holding people into account of their mistakes and pardoning them where necessary. Forgiving people, holding them into account of what they did, and offering pardon where pardon is needed. There are some things we may commit which need the law to take its course. You are forgiven, but the law will proceed from there on. Remember one time back when the Pope was shot, JB2, St. John Paul II. He was shot by a person. He forgave the person, but the law had to take its own course. He never stopped the law from holding the person into account for shooting him. But he forgave to free himself from anger and resentment against that person, that you don't see this shooter or supposedly an attempted murderer. To free the self from anger and resentment. So, my brothers and sisters, we are called to forgive, to free ourselves from resentment and anger, to be free, to be joyful, to have peace, to have a tranquil soul before the Lord. And where pardon is necessary, we offer pardon. where pardon is necessary. So therefore, my brothers and sisters, may the Lord help you to keep forgiving and offering pardon where necessary. That the penalty of whatever they have done against you, if you can pardon, glory be to God. But forgiveness is gracious, is a gift from God, and we are called to forgive. So for those who are in marriage relationships, hold each other accountable in that marriage relationship. Offer pardon where necessary. But more importantly, learn to forgive. Learn to forgive so that you can heal and have the joy that God wants you to have peace, to have tranquility of the soul, and to live a joyful, happy life. May God bless you.